Alright, sorry, I couldn't live stream earlier. Emma is not wanting to take her naps this week. So I am going to try to squeeze this in during the afternoon nap, which seems to be a bit better. But I've got the monitor here, which you might hear the white noise in the background. Sorry about that. Just want to make sure that if she does wake up, I can pause this and go get her. So, what we wanted to do last week, or what I wanted to do during the live stream, and I mentioned in the last live stream, is setting up some configuration for the Shift CLI tool. So let's bring up PHP Storm. I think probably what I'm going to do here, let's go ahead and make dir config. Oh, we already have config? Oh, of course, yeah, it's a it's a Laravel 0 application. We already have a config. Do you publish? Wait, no, the config is for the app. You would publish your own config file. That's a good point. Okay. So here's what needs to happen then. Let's touch tests. Do I have fixtures? Yes, fixtures, config, or we'll have to make this dir. So let's make dir config, and then let's do like a touch, and then like excluded. Let's just call it ignore.json. All right, and then let's bring up the Shift CLI, and let's kind of talk through like what I would want this to look like. And then we're going to figure out how to put it into place. So we'll just get GitHub Copilot later. Let's bring up this ignore.json. So this is a JSON file. I like the JSON configuration files, much like Pint. I think they're just really straightforward. The only difference here is I just feel like ignore is more natural than exclude. Exclude feels like kind of technical to me, and ignore feels a little more, there's a git ignore file. There's ignore files that are pretty common, like in your IDE even. So I just think that's a more natural word, is like ignore these things. It also gives you kind of the implication, I think, because most ignores accept wildcards, that like that's how this would work. So let's do something like here. Let's say you wanted to ignore like all like your test fixtures to the point, right? Like within this application, that's something we would want to do. We want to ignore all of our fixture files. So we could say something like this, maybe. We could also do something that's specific, where we would maybe ignore like allstar.blade.php. I think that would be cool. Or even go so far as like resources, templates, let's say we had something like that. I'm just trying to get some ideas here of like the different things that you might want to ignore. I don't know what else. I mean, it's always going to pull PHP files. I'm just trying to think of like what other things would you want to ignore. I don't really know. So anyway, this pretty straightforward format. I think the point here is that you can have paths, you can have and you can have specific files. So let's actually do that with a specific file. Are there any top level PHP files? They're not. Let me just put in like example.php. Okay, so two things need to happen now. We need to build a configuration parser, something that's going to, not necessarily parse, but loader, something that's going to load this file and make sure that everything is kind of injected and then used in the right places. So used in the right places would mean if we go to like our check lint, for example, I think we made a trait in one of the previous bits here. We would need to kind of pull this into exclude. Not only that, excludes directories. Exclude directories. So exclude is only for directories. It does take a name, and there is a not path. What is this? Let's see this. Add rules file names must not match. You may use patterns delimited with slash or simple strings. Okay, let's see this. Some special dir, use only slash as directory separator. A pattern, a regular expression, or string. So I think not path is actually exactly what we want. Like theoretically, just kind of playing around with like a Laravel bit, we could say something like config, shift CLI dot ignore. If we use it correctly, which we have, we just have some wildcard syntax. We should just be able to do this, not path, and it just works. Now, config's going to work in the event of this Laravel 0 application, which I think, again, gets bundled. That config's not really going to be there. What's kind of weird in that case is like we would have to make our own configuration, like our own configuration class, I think. We couldn't piggyback its config. You know what? Let's go see what Pint does, just to get some ideas here. I don't know why it searches AT&T. It's my ISP. I don't know why the default is this. It should just be Google, but whatever. Okay. I think they have, I've dug around in this before when contributing. I think if we get into value objects, maybe? No. What is it? Factories. I never know where it is. I think they have like a configuration. Yeah, configuration factory. Strange. We got these not names. We got excludes. Oh, this is the configuration for PHP CS. Fix. Okay, we merge in the set of roles. Configuration JSON repository is the very technical name that they have given how they load in the config file. So let's see how they're doing this. Collect this git. All right, what does git do? Git this git. Get on down there to git. There we go. Okay, if the file exists for the path, they're going to decode it and make sure, of course, that the decoding works, and otherwise they'll abort that it's not valid JSON. Okay, so where does path come from? I'm just curious. It gets injected. I don't think we need that to be injected. Okay, I think we need to do something pretty similar to what happens here with this. I think we need to make like a configuration helper class. Doesn't have to be all technical repository crap, but yeah, it's going to basically do the same thing. It's going to load in that JSON file and allow you to get properties from it in a very, straightforward way. This only gets very specific things. So yeah, let's go ahead and make this class. Again, I'm just gonna, this might all get, refined later, but let's create the class. And I'm gonna put it under support, because that's just kind of where things are floating now. That should have said support. Oh, you gotta change namespace first. Okay, so let's do that. And then, well, is this gonna be static? I could make the whole thing static, but that's going to be a bit hard to test. I'm wondering if, what do we have support? Task manifest? Task manifest has like its own kind of function, right? Yeah. Or do we, I forgot, do we load? I think we bind this somewhere as a singleton. Yeah, we do. Singleton task manifest. All right, so we bind it to itself and pass in what we would expect. All right. I guess what I'm thinking here is I want configuration to be a a static call like we've kind of mocked up here, and it needs to have get and load and all that kind of stuff that happens internally, much like the Pint repository does. But I'd really like to be able to access it statically, but not necessarily do all the container binding crap. So I think what that says to me is use a facade. This could just be a facade. And maybe this facade is called configuration, but the object maybe is called something else, such as a configuration repository. It can be more technical, but high level I want it to be like pretty straightforward. So let's borrow this. Let's just build this class for now. And I think what I'm going to call this instead of get is load. And I'm going to make it private because I would never really want anybody to change the way the configuration file is loaded. And this is ultimately going to return an array. And I just, yeah, let's call this shift CLI.json. I don't know, might change that later. Get the configuration or load. Let's call it load the configuration from the blah 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 file. Okay, great. And I'm just going to kind of invert this a bit. I hate the way this kind of breathes. So let's get rid of this path. It's always just going to be shift CLI.json. So if that file doesn't exist, we would just return an empty array. There is no default kind of configuration here. Oops, forgot my bit there. All right, and then I love tap, but I just feel like it gets overused in some cases, and because not everybody knows what tap is, I feel like why you know, I don't know why use it. I don't know. There's I don't know. Let's just say I'm all about like raising the bar, right? And like raising awareness for developers, but I don't know why something about tap is just like it. I guess because it's not anywhere else, you know? If somebody wants to use like a null coalesce or something, that's part of the language, and that's part of something that's in other languages, right? Other languages have a null coalesce operator, but not everything has tap. And again, that's not to say you shouldn't use it. I'm just saying my thought process for kind of not using it unless I just really use it a lot of places, and that would force the user to learn it. But I'm not using it in this code base anywhere else. And sometimes just this good old if configuration, you know, is equal to false, it just kind of reads what I'm after a bit more, right? Or in this case, if it's not an array, you know, it's all the same code. It's just, we'll see here in a second. I'll just do the comparison and we'll kind of see what I'm talking about. And then otherwise we would just return configuration, right? So if we format this so it's not, you know, god awful ugly, we still have this path bit. You know what? I'm going to go back and make this path because we're probably going to use that in like 19 places. So let's just make a private string this path. Whoops, path equals that string. All right, cool. Okay, so yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is more approachable to like every developer. You just come in, hey, if file doesn't exist, return nothing. Otherwise, you know, if we can't parse it, then abort because it's not valid JSON, right? And then otherwise return the configuration that we parsed. I feel like this is less dense, if nothing else, than this. So again, nothing wrong with tap, nothing wrong with that other stuff. It's just this calls out the different paths more so than this code in my mind. So again, nothing against tap. This is just denser code. I don't think anyone could argue that this code is more dense than this, right? So anyway. Okay, so I think the only other thing we need, and this would be our public function get, and we basically pass in a key, and this is pretty straightforward. We would really just return a data get on this load. Yeah, we'd need to statically load this in some capacity, wouldn't we? It would be like this data I see why they're using that get method now. Anyway, key. So we could say data, something like this, and make just a little private method, and it would effectively be return this data or, oh yeah, that's kind of beefy. You could do that. You could say this load. You could do that. Now, to the point of the argument I was just making a minute ago, that's a bit dense. So I think what I'd probably want to do is, well, first of all, yeah, I would want to declare this property. And let's get rid of that noise. And instead, let's just get rid of this return here and this, whoops, return this data. Let's trim that down just a bit, where we're not like doing the assignment and the null coalescence all at once, right? So let's say null, and I think that would mean that that would have to be nullable. And so yeah, basically if data, then we would return an array here. All right. And then we're just using data get. So this allows us dot notation. This allows us all the stuff that is, available from this Laravel helper method. So, okay, cool. I think this is pretty much written. I'm just gonna go ahead and get rid of that doc block. I don't see the value. Again, if you have these nice straightforward functions or methods or code, I don't think that that's necessary. Okay, so what I would like to do now is, here we would say ignore, but again, we can't call that in a static capacity just yet. So I think just to prove that this is kind of working right now, I think what I would like to do is let's just new this up for now. So we'll just make a new, we'll work on the static part off stream maybe. Let's see what kind of time I have left. How's Emma doing? She is out. Good. Let's just do this for now, okay? So again, this isn't going to go anywhere. I probably even would want to go so far as conditionally testing that. Like, don't put the not path in there. To that point, we probably also want like a default. Yeah. We probably want to pass in a default. So default's null. Yeah, default's null. Default. All right, there we go. So now that's going to allow me to pass in an empty array here. So if it doesn't find the ignore key, then just make it an empty array. We would ignore, we wouldn't ignore any paths. So because we have this finds files in a trait, that means that anything should end up working here. So I should be able to run php shift CLI run check lint and everything still work. Maybe I broke something. I would have expected some output there. What did we break? Or do we eat the output? Always forget. What do we do here? Display error and check lint. Oh, there is no lint. Maybe I meant to run format code. Maybe not. All right, let's do this. Here's what we can do. Let's just print R on files right here. All right, let's do this. Oops, that's check lint. Check lint. Okay, cool. So here's all the files that it found. I think what I would want to do now is try to get this to ignore the test fixtures somehow, which is interesting because it's actually not pulling in test fixtures, but it's because I probably don't have any PHP files in the text fixtures. So let's see if that's true. Yeah, I don't. I only have this ignore JSON file. So let's do this. Let's just put in a new file, example.php. Cool. All right, let's run this again. And there we go. Now it's pulling in test fixtures example PHP. So what I want to do is I want to copy our test fixtures config ignore and put this top level as shift CLI.json. And then let's just kind of clean this up real fast. So two things. One, we should see that this is loading, and then two, we should see that it's not going to include test fixtures anymore. So this should reduce to 22, and it should be missing text fixtures if all this configuration reading is working. So let's run this again. It dropped down to 22, and I don't see test fixtures here anymore. Awesome. All right, let's tweak this just a bit, and we'll say something along the lines of like any file called example.php. Let's run this again. We're still at 22, and we don't have test fixtures in there. Let me remove. Sorry, I thought I heard Emma. Let me remove that completely and see if we go back to 23. We do. There's fixtures. So this is working. It's working across the board. That's it. We have a configuration file now that is doing what we want. We can even leave it in this project because this would be, something we would want to ignore in our own project when we're using this tool. Okay, awesome. So let's go back and let's make the facade, I guess, right? It should be pretty straightforward. So that's how quickly you can make like a configuration repository. I think to that point, let's go ahead and change this. Why isn't my change working? I don't know. Let's do the old mouse refactor here. So let's say configuration repository. I just don't like using all those like managerial kind of words, right? They're just so technical. I could see why this is considered a repository, but in the technical sense of the term, it kind of has its own like connection information within it, which is, normally a repository. A repository is either the thing that is holding, or it's the thing that is kind of interfacing. And again, I think those lines get muddled when people use this word. So, but I don't want a configuration facade as well as a configuration class. I think that would lead to more confusion. So again, because of that, let's go ahead and make a facades bit here, and let's make a new class, and we'll call it configuration, and we'll extends facade. And I think, do they have the new auto loading thing now? Or do you have to, I think we still have to bind it in the container, which is lame. I think we still have to jump through the hoops of doing that. But you get the static, references by doing it this way. So let's do this get facade accessor, and I think we just return, we can just return configuration class is the simplest thing to do. And then I think in app service provider, we would bind this as a singleton. Oh my God, what's going on here? All right, so we'll say configuration. Yeah. So we'll say when you ask for configuration, you would get a oh my goodness. Configuration repository. I think this works. I don't know, it's been a long time since I've wired up a facade. We'll check the documentation if not, but let's finish this real fast. So right now this is used directly in our trait what is that called? Manages files. Oh my goodness, finds files. Finds files, there it is. All right, and we should be able to go back to this configuration git. All right, let's bring you in as the facade. Let's see if you work. Okay, I didn't explode anything. And I do see where do we still have that shift? Yeah, we do. Okay, and we still have test fixtures. So I should be able to back this off, and we go up to 24 now. We did add a new file, which is why we've added the facade file, which is now in here, facades configuration. So that's why we're up to 24 now. But note that test fixtures is now back in there. If I put it back in our JSON, so this is all working. Everything's registered and bound as expected. It's a singleton, so that should be all good. Yeah, so we could change this around a little bit and just get rid of this data thing and basically have the configuration bit load, I guess. We could also make this like static. There's a couple different options here that we could do to kind of make this work. So yeah, I think when I go to test this, I might need to change some of these things around. Maybe I do need a constructor that allows you to push in the path, so I could potentially load from those fixture directories. So there's some things here that might get tweaked. But I think for the most part, this is working. It's built in place. The last little thing we can do is just kind of generate a method tag here, so we can jump in, say static. This will return mixed, and this is basically the key, and we wouldn't type that, and we would just say like default. And now, there we go, key. And I don't know why that's not listed out as default, but hey, whatever, works for me. Okay, cool. I think this is pretty good. This works, and it's the beginnings of a configuration file, which we'll be able to put more things in as more tasks are developed. But I think it's a good start for excluding files which you wouldn't want these tasks to run on, which we saw we already need that in last stream. So yeah. Anyway, hopefully I'll be able to live stream next week. But again, I felt this was good to demo as part of the process. So see y'all next time.